now that we have the technical instructions out of the way, I'm usually supported by a whole IT department, so I need that consultation. And I'm actually going to skip past what I would say is the Kroger overview. I understand these slides will be posted on the website later, so I've included the obligatory Kroger commercial, but skipped past it, so don't tattle on me, please. What I want to do is focus on a couple of later slides. And, you know, picking up a little bit on what Jeff Simmons said earlier, you recall the slide where he said, determine the why. And I think we've all gone through that in the business sector in terms of determining why we support one thing versus another. Because we literally have thousands of options for things that we can support in a community this size. And with Kroger, you know, we guide that by three things, or with three expectations of outcomes. We want more satisfied associates with rewarding opportunities to serve their neighbors in need. If we do that, then the second part of our business, or the key to success, which is serving our customers well, naturally follows. And if, like us, when you're talking about serving customers, you are not limiting that to inside the walls of the store, but also out in your communities, where we actually blend the definition of customer service and community service, then that does follow. And that leads to the enhanced customer loyalty, presuming we've made the right choices for how to serve them both inside and outside the stores, and then a better quality of life in communities where our associates and customers live and work. You know, I cringe when I go to the State House, maybe by instinct, but also for a specific reason, is, you know, you hear this big box this or big box that, and I find myself reminding them, I live down the street from you. You know, Kroger is one person, we are your neighbors, so we're going to take care of each other. So I would say sometimes the definition of company and what we do is inappropriate. But like any company, we have limited resources, and we have to pick priorities. And I would say that translates to other corporate employers, but it frankly translates to all of us as individuals too. As much as we'd like to do more, we have to make choices. There are companies out there that pick one priority and do it very well. For us, we struggle to do 5. But most important among those is hunger relief. It's the largest component. In most years, it's in the high 60s to 70% of the total. And that has really been our trend with hunger relief at the top for 132 years. You know, the founder, Barney Kroger, literally started out sending horse-drawn wagons of food up and down the Ohio River Valley 132 years ago. And if he suddenly arrived on the scene today, he would still recognize who we are and what we're doing in the community. A little bit about our philosophy, but I do that as an example, and I do that with a caveat I would share, which is what's right for us in terms of how we support the community or what we do about hunger is not necessarily right for everyone else. So you need to define your own philosophy and your own engagement commitment in the community. And again, I would say the same thing both for your professional decision in that regard and your personal decision in that regard. Define your own philosophy. For us, shared again as an example, we really expect our stores to be the local store in every local community. So what we do about hunger or anything else in a specific neighborhood is different than the city in the next county or the next state over. It needs to be, because the mix of challenges facing those neighbors is unique and different in each place. I mentioned the customer service and community service already. We also don't just accept or allow volunteerism. We strongly encourage it, and I would say in some specific cases like our pharmacists or salaried management, it's a part of how we evaluate their annual performance. I mean, it is institutionalized as well. Now, we don't really need to have that to cause it to happen. The sort of people we hire, the sort of people who stay with us, that's built in. But also as we're developing rising stars or other leaders, we invest in them and their personal growth in part through community service. And that shows up in food banks all over, like the food banks that are represented here, in my own case, the Gleaners Board. So we walk the walk, and we need to. There's a practical reason too that would translate to other businesses, and that is, customers choose not just the first time they come shop with us, but every time they decide whether they'll return, in part based on what kind of corporate citizen they are, or we are. And we're aware of that. We also, and particularly with something like hunger that is multi-generational, I said earlier, we've been wrestling with it for 132 years, so it's certainly not going away in the next 2 or 3. It's a multi-generational, long-term challenge. The other thing is it's connected to other challenges. Sometimes it's the consequence and sometimes it's the trigger event, but typically someone is hungry, may have a job issue, they may have a housing issue, it leads eventually to health issues, I think you've heard some other speakers say. So the interconnection between hunger in part explains why we're involved in other things too. We do a lot for local schools, for example. And I think I'm stating the obvious to say that if a kid has been hungry all weekend, how much attention they pay for, how they prepare for the spelling test or the math test on Monday, they're not focused on that. They're focused on, if I get through the weekend, I get a meal when I get to school on Monday. So there's connection between what we do for schools and what we do in terms of hunger and so on. So as we talk about solutions, and maybe it naturally came up in your groups as you were identifying ideas, you're going to find hunger by necessity is connected to other challenges facing a community. What that also means, since it's connected to so many things, is we have a shared sense of ownership. We're all in it together, and we don't make assumptions at Kroger in terms of who's going to be in the food line, because it changes. I can tell you story after story about somebody who was a volunteer at a food bank one month, and their circumstances change, and they're in the line the next month. And it can be a little hard to take, but we take care of them. And then their turn comes around. There are also some very gratifying stories of people who were in the food lines over time, and now they work or volunteer for a hunger relief organization. So it works both directions, but you don't make assumptions. The other thing we find you don't make assumptions about is who can or will give and who does. The stores in this area and the populations that shop there that you might make an assumption could be the most generous donors through our food bank programs aren't necessarily. And the reverse is true. Stores that have maybe the highest, maybe it's not a good measure, but the highest SNAP or WIC usage, highest poverty numbers in a neighborhood, often are the most generous donors in the neighborhoods we serve. So the point there is don't make assumptions in either case. I want to highlight a couple of examples, not to talk about what we do so much, but maybe it'll trigger some ideas or give you some sense of what's already happening. There's been the long time pattern in hunger relief was that those who needed the food had to accept what other people chose to give. Maybe we've all done it. You go to the pantry when somebody's at the door collecting food and you give them the beets and the sauerkraut or whatever it is you think you're not going to eat. Well, after a while, as hungry as you are, it's a little bit unfair, uncomfortable, but that's what you have. So for that and a variety of reasons, the fact that we just know that wellness and nutrition need to be part of the process and need to be part of introducing more dignity into the hunger relief system. We developed a program called the Perishable Donation Partnership, which originated with a Kroger senior officer in our headquarters who was on the Feeding America board. And we agreed to be the first across the line and to try it because, frankly, one of those causes of concern as a company is the food safety issue. You don't want to make people sick. You don't want to have problems in any way, but you certainly don't want to do it in a way that you're dealing with lawyers instead of food banks. So it's, I probably picked on 6 lawyers in the room, sorry. But we had to proceed carefully, and somebody of our size or scale had to be the first ones to say, we're going to really gear up perishable donations. So we now donate perishable food from all of those departments We keep working to find additional ways to donate more. We test it, we try it. The food bank partners are great partners in that process. So be assured that when we've got extra milk or extra produce or extra meat, it is going into the system. And some of the Indie Hunger Network partners that you heard from earlier, others, it's going into that system. So it doesn't go to waste. And it's grown to a significant scale. As we hoped and as we expected, and in some cases at our invitation, we've gone out and recruited our competitors to sign on to the same program. Because after all, if you're in something for the cause and not for the attention, competition stays at the door. And we all pitch in together, whether it's for Gleaners or Midwest or whoever it might be. I had intended to mention the Hatch program, but I think you guys have probably heard that several times. The point there is maybe a continuation of that perishable donation partnership theme. We need full nutrition, we need full value. Whether you pay for your food through the line at Kroger's, or a competitor, or whether you need a little help in how you get that food, you ought to have access to the same nutrition as anybody else, the same wellness. Why should, that leads to disease incidences, a whole list of things. And so we're very conscious, we're very mindful of that. We're very gratified that Elanco came to us and invited us to be part of that test. And, you guys can influence that test, of course, by how many medium Kroger eggs you buy, but also not just that we can only use so many eggs, right? The intent is not to have us have too many and other people still not have enough. Share feedback. Let my store managers know it's a great idea. Talk to the grocery department person. Share ideas to improve the process with us and with Elanco and Roseacre and the food bank partners. It's a test for a reason. We want to build something that will work and that we can scale up. We've tried some things around milk the same way. In fact, I don't know if it was here from the Lafayette Rotary Club, but you guys are a great partner in getting milk to supplement the backsack program up there. Milk and eggs remain the biggest gaps, even with our perishable program. So as you guys don't stop the brainstorming with the table exercise earlier, keep doing it. And if you find things around protein and nutrition, I would particularly encourage you to pursue those. Well, as I mentioned earlier, competition has no place in hunger relief, regardless of the business sector, where you're directly in the same sector or not. There's room for all. And we need to invest in constructive, collaborative dialogues. Every theme of this conference, the taglines, they're all appropriate. I was very pleased to see that as it came up. Some of our most effective hunger relief programs are not just collaborative, but we define exactly what collaborative outcome we want to have come out of it. So if you take an example like Scouting for Food, we invited in the Boy Scouts, we invited in the Girl Scouts. As the father of an Eagle Scout, a Gold Girl Scout, I am pleased that program doesn't just help hungry families, sometimes the Scout's own family, but it teaches those kids life lessons and that they can make a difference through volunteerism. They literally go door to door and collect food, they volunteer at the pantries. If we're going to solve this, we need to be investing in teaching that next generation. Because again, to deliberately repeat myself, it's a multi-generational challenge. So hopefully, not just from what I've said, but from others too, you have a shared sense of urgency. If you didn't have a shared sense of urgency after Jeff Simmons left the stage, you weren't listening. But certainly I think it's true of all of us. It is urgent. And the fact that it goes on for decades and decades should not diminish that urgency at all. And the other, hopefully stating the obvious, but for emphasis, there is a role for everyone. We have a great partner school here in town, IPS School 46. Every kid in that school comes from a household that has hunger-related challenges. Not 80%, not 90%, all of them. And yet, They help us pack food bags for other charitable events. They volunteer with us at food pantries. Those kids who sometimes are in the food line are also helping. So if you can't give resources, you can give your time, you can share your talents. It's true of our customer base, it's true of our associates. We share our engineers when a hunger relief agency has a leaky roof or a building challenge. You know, each of you comes from a different career background or subject matter expertise, but I guarantee you there's something every single one of you can do for the food banks, for the food pantry. That's not to discourage you from donating money or food or other things, but I would encourage you to put a little effort into figuring out what exactly is that talent that you can share as well. The other one that people don't think about, so I want to mention it, as I sort of wind down the Indiana session and roll there, and I'm off to Springfield next week. There's no escaping the government relations part of my job, I guess. But advocate. Speak up. I hear it from legislators all the time. I hear it from state agencies. And let's face the reality. For most food banks, 2/3 or so of the dollars of the food that come into those regional food banks are federal or state programs. As much as Kroger and others give and individuals give, it is still a smaller piece of that pie chart in terms of where all that food originates. Now, if those federal or state government pieces of the pie shrink, then where do you think it's going to come from? There are going to be more people in the food bank line, more people in the food pantry line. So advocate. We hear it from government officials all the time. They want to hear from, quote, real people. That's you guys, not a registered lobbyist like me that they're probably tired of hearing from. So speak up, because they're your neighbors. They shop where you do. They bank where you do. So speak up as well. And with that, I will wrap it up.